Salutations from space, friends. This is Gemini and CV. It is August 31st, 2020, the weirdest year of all time. And we're going to talk about a Pisces full moon, which is wedge with Uranus. So meant to be weirder than usual, even. How in the heavens are you, CV?
I'm great.
Yeah?
I don't know if I should be, but I feel great.
Good. I mean, I'm not telling you what you should or should not be. Right. I'm just wondering if that's a thing you say, I'm great because that's the thing you say, or is that actually how you're really feeling?
You know, actually, I do feel great considering everything that is happening in the world. I feel like I get right now to be able to spend this time with you. I have good people in my life, so I'm actually truly doing great.
Right on. Yeah, I mean, it's so interesting as I'm connecting with people in sessions right now. People that I'm rapping with, for the most part, seem to be doing pretty well for this. I mean, I want to open my heart for people who are really struggling right now. There's a whole lot of them. This is a time of great change. I'm really feeling for people who have been called non-essential or who have been called essential for something that's not truly them. It's a tricky time. And also just in my own world right now, my partner's little boy, Koa, is in the hospital. He's been having some really difficult stomach-ish. And so I'm also there right now. So if I'm not as present as usual, that's one of the reasons why. And speaking of presence, CV, you just disappeared again, and now you're back.
See how quick that was?
Hmm. So, friends, if you're out there and you're hurting, or you have loved ones who are hurting like this, let's just maybe all take a moment. Um, I might even play a little song to like drop into our heart and open our compassion and send some love to people who are struggling right now. All right. We've been talking about how a couple of things. Hermes says not only as above, so below, but also as below, so above, which I take to mean that not only are we audience members of the Celestial Symphony, but that we have instruments in our hands and we can jam. And the truth is, when we get together and play together in numbers, that energy, that magical manifestative energy and creative force that we all have. It's just the divine birthright. It's magnified when we come together. So thank you for any of you, whether it's live or in a future time, who joined us for that thing. May all beings feel the love of all that is through these turbulent times and always in all ways. Because that's Pisces stuff. And it's a Pisces full moon, and it feels really electric.
Yeah.
And it feels like we might be able to break on through, and that's really building up. It's amazing because so much is being censored right now that it's hard to even know. But there's a lot of protests and revolutions that are happening about like the lockdown. So we all know about the protests that are being televised, interestingly. But there's so many that aren't right now, and there's so much tension and division and confusion and delusion. But if, I just have to like try to not figure it all out and like have a little faith, right? And that's another place where I think Pisces can really excel. Pisces can really also excel in like feeling the weight of the world. And therefore it can excel in getting drunk. But, it can feel a lot more if you stick to the tea. That's what I say. And so here's a cup of old tea to everyone out there. And I, as promised, I'm a little bit out of it and not so present right now. So there you go. All right, CB, how can we get this thing on track?
Well, I'm going to backtrack and ask you a question. So I just want to say that I have personally been enjoying your Instagram account, and you're spending a lot of time writing about the daily transits. And today you wrote about the rare void of course moon, and which we're still in the final throes of. And I'm interested to what you think about having this void moment right before this full moon.
Yeah, so void of course is an incredible doctrine. Then I read this actually in Demetra George's wonderful book, Ancient Astrology in Theory and Practice, which is getting more and more worn in. I totally recommend this book for any astrologers, whether you're, interested in ancient astrology or not. It's really cool for us to connect to our roots. I mean, some of it, it's like, I want to know what that is, and I want to find a way to kung fu it into something that I can actually use as a healer, because some of it just feels so old, I guess I should say. But yeah, I mean, one of the things, like the Hellenistic image of the void of course moon actually feels a little bit newer. This really tripped me out, right? Because oftentimes the old approach to astrology, I think it's not really like the circle of the chart. It's really like a dodecagon. It's really like 12 notch switch, and there's no such thing as a cusp, you know what I mean? Or maybe actually there's very much a thing as a cusp. It's like a wall that you have to jump to get from Virgo to Leo, and well, that would be hard, from Leo to Virgo and Virgo to Libra, etc. That wouldn't be too hard. It's just retrograde. Anyway, so modern astrology feels much more circular. I was born with the sun in the first degree of Scorpio, and so many see that as kind of Libra, Scorpio. Where in the old ways, it's like, no, that's a polarity change. That's like a triplicity, quadruplicity change. You just jumped a wall into a different country, and you went from Venus land to Mars land, and. But this old image of the void of course moon actually feels a little bit more circular. So it's getting a little more tech than maybe we should in a Pisces full moon. But of course, a Pisces full moon means that sun is in the sign of Virgo. So let's talk systems. So the void of course philosophy is based upon the idea that one of the moon's principal gigs is what's called translation of light. And I love this so much because usually in astrology we learn about void of course, but we don't learn about translation of light. And it's just like astrology is so fear-mongery, right? Like, let's talk about the void, but not talk about the light. But so anyway, in the old image, one of the moon's principal gigs is to bring the energy of, like, I'll say it this way, of one conversation to that of the next. And let me actually talk human experience first, and then we'll bring it back into the doctrine. I think that always helps me. Let's just make a hypothetical. Let's say you wake up in the morning and you have this like amazingly loving time with your partner, and like things are shining. And then you're on the way to work. Let's say you're office peeps and your work's still open and stuff. and you're driving on the highway and some asshole can't drive and almost kills you because they swipe you and like move into your lane and you almost hit a car and you're just all crazy, right? Um, and you're on the way to work and you've got this big presentation to give. And you know, like that car wreck could have kept you from this place where, like, if you really rock it today, things are gonna shine on you. And now you've almost lost your life and you're in this state of shock. But actually, it kind of fired you up in such a way that you totally rock it in front of the boss. And you do such a good job at this presentation that you get a promotion. Then you go to lunch with your mom, and she's like, wow, you're so beaming. You're like, I got this promotion, everything's gonna change. And um, so she's all happy and proud of you. And then somehow in her glow for her child, she's noticed by a fella across the way, and your mom's been waiting for a new guy for some time, and it's just like on, right? And then I don't know, something else happens. But so like if, well, actually, let me finish it up. So then let's say you go home, and you're just in this great mood, and you see your partner again, and this time it's like, who knows if it's his envy trip or whatever, but you guys have like a really tough night and it kind of works the end of your day. So now you're in bed and you're like, can't sleep because there's this aggression slash can't sleep because you just got promoted and all these things, and maybe mom found a new guy, you know, and you didn't die, and so there's gratitude, and you're right. So like, how do you get to sleep? And the technique that I employ, it's called feeding the moon, and this comes from an old Gurdjieff thing from Beelzebub's tales to his grandson, and it's not what Gurdjieff's necessarily talking about. His thing's kind of heavier. His thing is that like in the end will kind of get reprocessed, and it sounds like come back, and that all this like suppressed joy and pain and fear and the things that were left like from being expressed will be fed to the moon, like you're fed to the moon and composted and then kind of reseeded here. But the way that I like to use this idea of feeding the moon is this, like, if that's true, and I'm not saying it is, but if that's true, then like just get a jump on the thing. So instead of having to do that full on lifetime review of all the should haves, like just live your should haves, and every night feed the moon. It's like a little day in review. This happened to me. This was beautiful. This was really scary. This was amazing. That could be cool. This was heavy. This is where I'm at, you know, and the moon will receive, right? And take that weight from you. And then in your dreams, reflect it back to you in a way that, you know, you can be in a better state of knowing without trying to figure it out. Because if you're trying to figure it out, you'll never sleep. All right. So why did I share this long story about a hypothetical day in the life? Because I think it's an amazing metaphor for void of course and translation of light. The moon takes about, on average, the moon takes 2.3 days to move through an astrological sign. And while she's in that sign, she's making all these connections. She's having all these conversations. And so let me just show an example of this. This will be a lot easier to get after this. Here's this moment now. And the moon's in these last degrees of Aquarius. She's applying to sextile Mars. And after that time, because that's the last aspect that she will make in the sign of Aquarius, she's said to be void of course until she moves into the next sign, Pisces. And then she has all this work to do. So let me just go by hours. And here's moon coming into the sign of Pisces. And in Pisces, she's first going to oppose the sun. And then in this technique, we really stop at Saturn. So all these asteroids, it's basically about visible planets and the so-called Ptolemaic aspects, which are conjunction, sextile, square, trine, and opposition. So Moon, for example, in the sign of Pisces, is said to not be able to see Mars in Aries because neighboring signs are said to be blind to one another. Now, if you've been at this for a while, you might be tuning into the truth that this degree and this degree are contra antitia, and we could go on, right? Astrology is endless. But let's just say that Moon will do a lot of things. She's going to make sextiles to these Capricorn planets. She's going to oppose these Virgo planets. She's going to trine Venus in Cancer, but she won't see Mars. And so this kind of specific order, first she's going to oppose the Sun for full moon. And then she's going to, it said, carry the light of that conversation, I'll call it, right? So what is a Pisces moon opposing the Virgo sun? What is that polarity, that opposition? I mean, certainly there's some stress around that kind of Virgo particularity and the Pisces, like boundarylessness, right? But really, as are all the axes of the chart, like Pisces and Virgo are two sides of one thing, just as cold and hot are two sides of temperature. But so there's something here, and it might be like, hey, we're tuned into just the mysteries, the mystical nature, but do that through the systems. Do that by shining a light on things like astrology or, the tarot or herbalism or whatever. And then that will help open us to more spirit and more of an overseeing, right? So anyway, Moon's going to carry that energy that whatever happens with the sun, and she'll carry it all the way for like more than a day, because the next aspect that she'll make from there to a visible planet is the sextile with Jupiter. Mm-hmm. And then it looks like from there, it looks like she's going to oppose Mercury the next day, but it's not true because Mercury moves really quickly. So first she'll sextile Saturn, and then she'll oppose Mercury, and then she'll trine Venus, and then she's done for the day. So here we go. Pisces moon opposite Virgo sun, full moon. Pisces moon trining Capricorn Jupiter in retrograde. Pisces moon trining Capricorn Saturn's retrograde. Pisces moon opposite Virgo Mercury, and then finally Pisces moon trining Cancer Venus. And then according to the modern approach, then she's void of course, just for a little bit of time because Venus is in such a late degree of Cancer. And then Moon moves into the next sign of Aries, and she's like kind of starts a new day. I literally see it that way, even though it's like 2 1/3 days for the Moon to move through a sign. It's like a day of the Moon's life. It's like, so the Moon wakes up, and the first thing that happens, and she actually gets to stretch a little while and do some things on her own because she doesn't oppose the Sun until like 10 degrees of Pisces Virgo. Right. So she just, for like a whole decan of travel, like a whole 10 degrees of travel, she just gets to be the Moon, and she gets to see how the Moon does Pisces, And then suddenly she's doing Pisces in her response to this opposition with the Sun. And sometimes in the opposition, a lot of Pisces is required, because there can be that tension and that pulling, and we need to be in our space of compassion. And let's say any difficulties that are happening there, she goes and trines Jupiter, who is said to rule the sign of Pisces traditionally. And so Moon gets kind of fortified through that. So like there was a tense conversation maybe, or she just doesn't understand it. This person's so opposite the way that she thinks, or she's asked to think in this world that she's living in. And she goes talk to Jupiter, and he's like, look, it's cool. You're doing it right. They just don't know, And then she goes and talks to Saturn, and he's like, maybe that's true, but don't listen to this guy, whatever, right? And so that idea of translation of light, it has many beautiful astrological applications. It's typically used in horary astrology, the astrology, like divination astrology, where we ask questions and get an answer from the chart, or electional astrology, where we use astrology to find out the right time to launch a project, or quit a fucking job and do your thing, or whatever it wants to be, invest something or whatever. But I think it has really beautiful natal applications. Like, I'm always tuning in with clients to like which planet's light the moon is carrying when they're born and where the moon is carrying that light to. And I was born, according to the modern definition, void of course. Like, the moon had finished doing what she did in the sign of Gemini that day. She's at 25 degrees Gemini, and she wouldn't make any more aspects to visible planets until she moved into the next sign of Cancer. And so one thing that's said of void of course is that it often means your calling will arrive like later in life, your true vocation. And that was true for me. Like, I didn't receive astrology until I was 37. Like, I didn't really even take a look. And I've seen it true and I've seen it not true. And then it was really interesting to read in this old book that void of course is a fully different thing. One more thing I want to say about the metaphor is, like, this is what I think of as void of course, according to that old image. It's like, or the modern approach is like, the moon's finished doing all her stuff for the day, and now she's like trying to go to sleep, and she's like dealing with all this passion and pain and fear and pleasure and all the things that happen for the day, and she's trying to figure it out. So she just got to feed it to whoever the moon's moon is. And then she can just enter the dream, which is really like modern astrology is like, oh, Neptune, dreams, but traditionally that's the moon's realm. And she just kind of gets to be herself, and a bit described by the, element and all that of the sign in which she resides. And then she wakes up the next morning in a fully new country that speaks a different language, and she gets to work again, if you will, right? But what was interesting to read in Demetra George's Ancient Astrology is that this Hellenistic approach is actually way more circular. It's not like, oh, when you're done in this sign, you're void, and you might as well just meditate because nothing's going to happen. The way people speak about void, of course, it's similar to what we hear about Mercury retrograde. Like, don't initiate things, don't sign contracts, just take it easy. But while Mercury retrograde's 3 weeks long, the longest of void, of course, moon could be in the modern context is like, I mean, I guess there would be rare situations where the moon would be void for a 2.3-day journey through an entire sign, or a little bit longer. But usually there are a few hours to a day, sometimes a little bit more. But in the old context, it's actually more circular. It's like, no, a moon's not void unless there's no planetary aspect for 30 degrees of lunar travel. So she has to move a full sign's worth of zodiac, but it's not about the signs. And this is actually what surprised me about it. So let me show you where we are right now.
Please.
And, maybe just for the sake of this, I'll take away all the invisibles, because this technique is about moon's aspects to visible planets. I'm going to rewind time a couple days to when moon was in the sign of Capricorn. And here was a time where you can see moon had just, and basically is in this moment where I stopped, conjoining Jupiter. And then according to translation of light, she actually brought Mercury to Jupiter. And now she's going to bring this conjunction with Jupiter and oppose Venus, which really, according to the old places, would help this Capricorn moon out in a huge way, because Venus is living in the moon's world of Cancer, and she can kind of offer some support for moon's Capricorn journey, which is not traditionally said to be moon's happy place, right? Then moon will see Venus, will oppose Venus, and aspect means to see. And they used to call these oppositions diameters, which you can see why that makes sense. And then the moon's going to carry Venus into this conversation that she has in her conjunction with Capricorn Saturn, which, I mean, if you're going to Capricorn, that's the cat to talk to. And then there was a time here, and it was a pretty short time, where she's said to be like beseeched by the malefics. This is all old astrology, right? So usually old astrology, it's a much harsher version. But here moon is between, I called this in an Instagram post the other day, between a rock and a hard place. Because on one side you have Saturn, and on the other side you have a square with Mars, which is cast to 2715 Capricorn, right? So for a short time, Moon is just kind of between the rock and the hard place in that way. And then she did square Mars. And then she, according to the modern thing, she's void of course, and according to this ancient approach. Because typically, like when the moon, even in late degrees, is square, and the modern void of course thing, she goes into the next sign, like soon after, and the void's done because she woke up in a new day in a new sign. But traditionally, if we look at 30 degrees from here, who will she next aspect? And this is where you really have to know your blind spots, because traditionally Aquarius is said to be blind to its neighboring signs, which are Capricorn and Pisces. So Moon during her journey through Aquarius will not aspect Jupiter or Saturn. And Aquarius is also said to be blind, as all signs are, to the neighbor of the sign that opposes it. So Leo's neighbors are Cancer and Virgo. Those are the quincunx signs from Aquarius. Moon can't see either of them. So she's not going to see anybody in this Aquarius sign except for Mars, right? And because Mars is also moving direct, right, between this time of Moon, and thanks Astro Gold software for making this incredibly easy, Moon squaring Mars, and that was in Pacific time, it was like 12:30 p.m. on Saturday. And then the time in Aquarius, which is coming in a couple and a half hours, when Moon sextiles Mars from Aquarius, that's about 10 p.m. on Pacific, Monday night to night, right? Moon is in this kind of official void of course position. This sextile is at 27 degrees and 35 minutes, and the square was at 27 degrees and 15 minutes. So she's moved 30 degrees and 1/3 of a degree, right? And so it's rare actually when the moon is going to be able to travel that far through the zodiac without making an aspect. It's only going to happen in circumstances like this, when like most of the planets are in signs that are traditionally said to be invisible. And the other thing I'm tripping out, I mean, I'd love to ask Demetra about this. It's like the moon's previous aspect was square to Mars, and then her next aspect will be sextile to Mars. So she doesn't see any of the, it's like, that's like, she had a conversation and she like walked away for a couple of days after this square with Mars. It's like, fuck that, right? And then she comes back and they try it again because she's shifted her perspective. She was talking to Mars in a Capricornian way with this really strong Saturnian influence. And Aries Mars, what's that?
In a square way, right?
In a square, right. I mean, Aries Mars doesn't want to hear that shit. And it's so alive, in my language. I actually, the Insta post I wrote for that was like, F you, I won't do what you tell me. I could not hear that Rage Against the Machine song in my head. And it's so alive right now. And then I saw it's actually being used as a vehicle for this movement right now, which totally makes sense, right? But that Aries Mars, we were talking about this a couple of weeks ago, squaring that Capricorn crew, it's just activating like the second movement of this year's symphony in a huge way. And it does look like the fires of individuation versus the rules of the culture and that, I mean, ideally it wants to be how a grounded, beautiful, hearing of the voice of Earth stimulates us to be ourselves. But that ain't happening with a lot of work, and it's going to show up in our real world, like needing to resist, like culture, frankly, especially when it ain't behaving, right? I mean, this is really about misbehaving. And so the moon's kind of in on that. And she said, hey, man, Saturn said, and Mars is just like, but then she comes into Aquarius and suddenly she's reborn as a revolutionary, right? Like every sign is a reaction to the sign that precedes it. So in Taurus, we want to tune into the true traditions that preserve the way of Earth for the 7 future generations. This is a very beautiful and important place. So Daniel, my first teacher, thinks of it as the Council of Elders. I love it, the circle of grandmothers, But it does show up because we stopped listening to those elders as the need for, government and police and that kind of trip, right? Well, Aquarius reaction to tradition is revolution. right? And so Mars in Aries is way more down to hear that story, right? And that's the sextile. The sextile is a much more agreeable alignment. So the moon comes in and talks to Mars again. And he's like, yo, you changed your fits. Like, I like what you're wearing. He's like, what are you holding? And she's like, oh, it's a saber. He's like, I love it. You know what I mean? Or she's like, it's a ray gun. It's very Aquarian. He's like, cool. You know, what are we gonna do? I mean, it is a very revolutionary thing, but I think it's born out of this kind of long experience of this tension of, is it okay for me to be me? You know, I'm being told even if I go walk on the street, I'm killing old people or something. You know, like what? You know, there's this, and I'm Moon. I want to be love. You know, I want to offer nurturing, but at the same time, there's this part of me that like can't deal with the lockdown anymore. If that's one example that I'm sure is relevant for most people listening to this, and there's so many more, and we're seeing it in the world without, and that's a reflection of the world within, and we need some change. And so anyway, according to the old approach, Moon's been void of course since Saturday midday until tonight, Monday night. And that, and you know, like last night I had to work and get some stuff done for a class I've been teaching, or else I would not have put a finger on the keyboard and the mouse. Like, I just needed to chill out. I've been watching some Karate Kid on Netflix. Like, I've been lazy, you know, and sometimes we just need that so much. In that sense, it's like you have 2.5 days to feed the moon, process. Now, there's a better way to do that than watching Cobra Kai on Netflix. Like, get out in nature, but it's been super smoky here, you know. So I think everybody's been tense. And anyway, I put out on Insta today and on the Facebook page, it's like, yo, like, have you been void? And it's been mixed reviews. Some people like more productive than ever before. A lot of people were like, thank you. Like, thank you for saying this so I can give permission to myself to like check out. And then with Koa's health, and I'm going to ask you to speak for a little bit, CV, so I can check in over here because I just got a text. But yeah, you know, I see this. It's like, well, I mean, first of all, we can see so many alignments to this young guy's natal chart that this is definitely a time where things are coming up, and I feel like it's going to break through. But then the question is always like, when? Um, and I think that this shift, like Moon coming out of void tonight, is really going to offer sweet release. And the amazing thing is that she then kind of gets to get a feel for Pisces, which is such a feeling place, you know, before she has this conversation with the sun, the full moon, which has obviously been building for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And that was like a 2 week sentence. So what came alive for you in the midst of that journey, CV?
Well, recapping all of it, what I think, it's really beautiful because and it seems the moon was having all of these conversations, and the void of course really felt like, in that description, like a pause in the conversation. And thinking about that, of having sort of being besieged, right, and then going into this void of course and having this pause and then re-entering this like softer conversation with Mars. And what I really want to ask is coming back to your question about feeding the moon, right? Like going back to your analogy about like this literal translation of light, of good, bad experience, all of these happening, right? The way that we can kind of get flung through our days. And like, I love this idea that we can sort of be conscious of that. We can understand the way that we're translating the light in our lives, and how can we use this new moon to like, to consciously, to feed our moon, right? To like, to process.
Yeah, I mean, that's always the question of the astrology, right? Like, how will this help me know more about me, and or like how will this help awaken me, and then how can I help awaken it, right? It's like
Yeah.
being in there. I was talking to Mark Elmy, my friend, who's a great Maya daykeeper, recently about time and ceremony. You know, in the Maya ceremony, it's so much about sacred time. And he's like, you know, we keep the days to know when to have ceremony, and we have ceremony to keep the days. And I really feel that when we're on our game, this is what astrology has to offer. I mean, so many times astrology is being used as a way out, right? Um, like there's a couple of ways to take it. I'm going to read this thing. Came in from a dear friend who's a very Piscean, amazing, um, powerful lady. Just as I was sharing, she writes, "Love you. I'm in such a heavy sludge right now. I can barely keep my eyes open. My back went into spasm out of nowhere. I'm extremely exhausted. Um, Nanny canceled and I'm full time with kids. Ah, right? I mean, it's amazing because, like, that's exactly what I'm just talking about. You know, like in the nanny canceling, right? It's like, oh, now I have to be in that Capricorn Cancer, like, elder mother role instead of being able to break out and, like, in her case, probably go on a date with her Aries husband. I mean, it's like so amazing, right? And so this happens all the time. So, I mean, I can say, for example, like last night, oh, yeah, I have to do this work and I'm feeling really behind and I'm stressed about that, but I'm supposed to be. So, so sorry. You know, I'm not going to step into my responsibilities right now, right? Or I can say, okay, yeah, this is why this feels more difficult, but I get to like try this out from within that space. I get to have a look at those ones in me who are like, no, 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 just the Netflix, versus the one in me who's like, I told you to smash the television again. You were better in those years. And you know, that whole thing. And like to like create within that field, right? It's a I wish I could call it rare, but it's an amazing thing to be able to like experience life with those voices going on. We don't always want to be, I don't want to always be there, you know. But if you choose to experience life during the struggle and the you know the angst and whatever, rather than just shutting down until it's not hard anymore. I mean, I so often as an astrologer, and you know, sometimes people just need it. Sometimes it's just like, hey, when is this going to end? And sometimes it's really nice to be like, you know, like February 2nd. I know it's a while, but it's not that long. You can do it, you know. But I don't like to, it's very rare that I'll go there. You know, usually I want to speak about what it is, why they know why it is, and when it is now, and all that. And then it's like, look, it doesn't get better. You get better.
Yeah.
And then you don't want it to end because you realize it's been like stimulating this amazing transformation in your life. And, you know, it's probably not such a beautiful thing when the caterpillars turn to absolute goo within the chrysalis, you know, but it comes out with wings on. And, you know, the amazing thing about that metaphor, which I think we all know by now, is that the only thing preserved from caterpillar to butterfly is the respiratory system. So it says, remember to just breathe. Yeah.
I never knew that.
Yeah, like I don't know what caterpillar butterfly respiratory system looks like, but I've certainly heard that. It's a pretty cool thing. So like whatever caterpillar's lungs were, like need to still be able to breathe during this transformation. The rest of them is totally just gooed, right? Um, so yeah, it says as you are transforming and learning to fly, remember to just breathe. And I think there's also this thing too, and it's really alive for me right now. Remember also to grieve. Caterpillars are fucking amazing. You know, they're beautiful and they're so soft. Like my cat's softer, but caterpillars super soft, you know? And you don't want to pet them because you're worried that you're going to hurt the caterpillar and all that, but you don't want to not pet them either because they're so soft and they're amazing and they have all the legs and they're so cool. So there's something about like becoming a butterfly, like that's cool. You can fly, but you used to crawl with a million legs and you were super soft and now, you know. So I think there's that thing about our transformation and we forget this too much. Like we just typically forget this because we're so ready to get rid of the old patterns and burn it away. I mean, I talked about this last time we connected. Um,
Yeah.
but if we don't grieve that, we're really doing ourselves a significant disservice right? Whether we're willing to make this great change because it's no longer serving us anymore, it has served us to bring us to who we are right now. We ought to have a little like gratitude for that, even if it was painful and traumatic. And that kind of brings me back to this full moon, because one of the really key signatures of this coming full moon, we're not going to see unless I bring Uranus back into this mix. And this is called a wedge of the full moon, of course, meaning moon in the opposite degree from sun. But Uranus, moon sextile Uranus, and applying, and from both ways because Uranus is retrograde, and sun trine Uranus and applying, and from both ways because Uranus is retrograde. And Uranus it's not right now, but Uranus is actually visible with the naked eye a couple of times a year. I've been initiated. So maybe moon will translate the sun to Uranus. And there's a couple of things I feel here, like Uranus is sudden. We've been living it so literally in California up here, and many people have in their own ways. But like when Uranus stationed retrograde and Mars was squaring Pluto, like at the same time, um, crazy lightning happened. Like I've never seen anything like it. We were watching it at night, and then California caught on fire from these lightning strikes. So all over the place. And right now I'm like looking at a dark red sun because it's so smoky out. And so there's a lot of people right now who are displaced, and it's like totally terrifying. So Uranus he's associated with lightning and sudden impact and trauma, right? I mean, like so many people, I think this is a kind of really speaks about the essence of this particular full moon, is that people get in these, near death experiences, or some people actually die and come back. There's some accident out of nowhere and they're just shocked out of their body, and they see the light or see the ancestors and are given the choice. I've sat with a few people, well, more than a few now, in astrological consultation. It's so cool. And we have the moment of their like rebirth and looking at that versus the chart and all that. It's such an amazing thing. But that seems to, I haven't ever spoken to somebody who's been through that and didn't say, obviously, it was the greatest change in their life and they were reborn, and sometimes even with a new name and everything, and I can't imagine being who I used to be and I needed it. And, so some of us will have that on much more subtle levels. And some even more traumatically. I mean, the level of abuse in this plane, in this reality, is just so much. But these are like the trine and the sextile to a very poetic and compassionate and healing and feeling moon. And this coming from Uranus and in Taurinus. I mean, it really can speak to some of our body traumas and some of the stuff that we've been carrying, like ready to be released. And I think for some of us it could feel really sudden like that. But sudden is in like even like the trauma and the accident, like on one level, its purpose is to just crash you into the moment now. And my buddy David Cochran, I love, he talks about Uranus and free jazz because it's just so free and so in the moment, and you never know what's going to happen. But it's the same thing. It's sudden. It's this moment now. And I think the Pisces full moon like really benefits from that energy because we, on one level, we just want to go into faith and the dream and hope and compassion, and it's going to be all good. And, let's stay there. Yeah. But on another level, we have to like bring compassionate love and, like attention to the particulars of the trauma of this world. And typically we look there and we just can't deal. In fact, I'll say in so many ways, the traumas of this world are the remnants, the symptoms of like the suppression of our species which is choosing to forget the greatest trauma that happened when we almost all nearly died, like 13,000 years ago. I speak about it all the time. We spoke about it recently. It's like a very Uranian thing to me. And I think part of this full moon is bringing the ability to like sit with that and resist the fidget, use that kind of energy like productively. So like an example would be like mala or rosary, you know, like really productively moving that energy, or you know, like exercise, some kind of rhythmic motion, drumming would be so amazing, just so we can kind of sit with it all and be with all the tension and just like love it, because it is that force of awakening that allows us to experience more of the dream. Yeah. And you know, it's interesting because nothing's left in Leo. We began a couple of weeks ago with a Leo new moon and Mercury, and this is a really interesting thing with astrology. Do we want to go solar? And the moon, the sun jumped into Virgo some time ago now. And so there you go, like the dial changed. Or do we want to go solely lunar? Which is how I tend to go with it and say, no, this is the Leo moon game we're still playing. And in true Pisces fashion, you can't even see that anymore on the chart. You have to like remember it all. You have to be in that space of where we're coming from and that, you know? And so when you look at Leo and Pisces together, well, traditionally they're said to not be able to see one another. But what do you feel, CV, that Leo and Pisces share? Like what kind of things can serve the needs of both of those tribes?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind was your conversation about the Leo new moon and this idea surrounding it about using this time to figure out your art, whatever it is, the artist that you know you want to be. And coming from that, thinking that we're going into this full moon Pisces, which is like, in a sense, like the goo of the zodiac, right? There's something I think about Pisces of like surrender, right? So it's like we're doing this work around thinking what it is, and then there's this like listening, like the final we're receiving the final cosmic orders of this lunation of what that is, right? So I think the artist, right, that's the thread, right? This idea of communication and expression between those two. That's where I'm seeing.
Yeah, I'm totally with you. I mean, and so that's a thing where I'll say, like, you know, more Leo new moon cycles will be like answered with an Aquarius full moon across the way.
Yeah.
But the other option is Leo new moon and Pisces full moon, and that one leans me more towards the art, and it's really a mystical art, and yeah, it's amazing these last couple weeks how, I mean, people who booked sessions a month or two ago or whatever, like it's so that thing's amazing too. That's like so like Piscean, it's perfect. It's all part of the thing. Like when people show up, it's just like, oh my gosh, this was literally the hour we were clearly meant to be speaking. Look at what's happening with your astrology right now. And if we had connected a couple months ago when you first booked it, like it wasn't ready yet. So I just it's just it's always so amazing when we just release this like doubt. And sometimes like the greatest doubt is our need to know or our need to define a thing. And I love the way that Virgo reacts to Leo, which is like, yeah, you're right. You can do anything you want to do, but what's it going to be? And get good at that and polish the stone before you come to the stage called Libra, where there's other ears to play your flute to or whatever. Um, but it can also just kind of be a downer, right? Because we're inspired, we're ready to go, and it's like, no, it's not good enough yet, or comparing this to that, or how do you define that, right? Like, oh, what's your genre, right? That's like the worst question to, that's the kind of question that kills music. Do you know what I mean? Or even like kills astrology. What kind of astrologer are you? Are you a Hellenistic astrologer? Are you like, no, I don't live 2,000 years ago. I study the stuff. Are you Vedic? Are you, you know? And it's like the need to classify myself just said no to following the flame of inspiration.
Mm.
And yet, being in the study, polishing the stone, learning the systems, and so, and the systems, I think I said systems, like lets me like be grounded and rooted in particular in such a way that like when it's time to play, it just flows out of me. Right? So if you really want to be the beaming horn player, like learn your scales, and then it's like your body learns that in such a way that now you have the facility. That's a good word for this time right now. You've developed the facility to just let it all go and be in that moment in such a way that facility would keep you. Right? So it's like when we're consciously like, I need to do this right, we're not even near the now and here. But when we've like studied and learned our figures and all that, we are in such a place that the body is ready to just release and let the flow like be a beautiful river for our inspired artistic creation to just stream out of us, you know?
I love how you circled back to the free jazz, right? It's the same idea. Like you have to learn it really, really well before you can like get free with it.
Yeah, totally. Because like when I free jazz, it's like, oh, cool. Well, this is a really great place for me to like not fall prey to my inner critic who says like I don't know how to play, because I don't need to know how to like harmony and know how to play over chord changes, because I'm just gonna like bite my reed and squeal and you know. But on another level, it's like no, when you can bring all of that to it. And so yeah, I often see this, like the best musicians didn't learn to play by reading, right? They just followed inspiration and opened their ears and then like learned to like do what they loved in someone else until they found their own voice. But then later they went into the theory and that just took their game to a whole nother level. And that's actually, yeah, that's the, I mean, I always speak about this model because it's my past life in this life. I'm sorry, I cannot not look that way because there is a bright red sun staring back at me through the smoke. That's like, yeah, it's I'm still Leo. I'm still fiery. Um, anyway, yeah, I mean that's been my walk in this world, and there's so much, at least in like astrology business, that totally corresponds to music business. It's like laughable is the right word actually, but yeah, that bit of just learning to follow your inspiration, in an unbridled way, authentic expression of your radiant art, and then going to dial it in. Not because you're not good enough, but because it's going to allow you to better express who you are without constraint. And yeah, I mean, hard to call this a conversation because I've just been talking this whole time. Although my prayer before these things begin is, may the wisdom of this beautiful being, and let's honor everyone that's here now and in the future, these beautiful beings speak through me today. And I put on the magic ring and it goes, and it's not always me. And I hope everybody knows that's not just justification. But CV, if you had asked me a few hours ago to like name the theme of what's aligning for us with tomorrow night's full moon, late night in September 1st Pacific time, 10:22 p.m., 10 degrees and 12 minutes, Pisces moon sextile or wedge Uranus. It really is that. Like, yeah, you've been asked to kind of slow it down and be in your practice, but this isn't because you're not good enough. It's just to help you know that you are, so that you can release control and just like let your inspired art flow. And we're going to see a lot of like Dharma art and spirit art, which frankly all art is and all spirit is. So hopefully that inspired everybody out there to grab your guitar or your paintbrush or your microphone or your astrology or your dancing feet or whatever it is that allows you to just release who you feel you need to be and let you be who you totally are, because that's like the one the world needs, and she needs us to be us right now.
I'm going to make a final statement.
Hmm.
So, I'm going to ask you a question, and I don't expect you to answer this right now. Because I'm excited because we are putting together another newsletter. So if people are not subscribed, they should go to your website and subscribe to your newsletter so they get the answer to this question, which is, what is our ritual homework for this full moon? But you're not supposed to answer.
Well, I thought the question was going to be, "What's your website?" And so I'll
Do
only
that.
answer a question, an answer. I will only offer an answer to the unasked question, which is GeminiBrit.com. Folks, go sign up over there if you're not on my list. We're going to get more active and more particular and systematic once the Virgo new moon aligns. But right now, you will receive a mission if you are signed up on my mailing list about a specific way to play with these energies artistically, and we're finding ways that we can share with one another, because once again, we have instruments in our hands, we can jam, and it just is a lot more fun when we join together and do it as a band. So super sweet to play some music with you once again. CV, thank you for the opportunity, and thank you also so much for helping me follow and like actually face some of my fears around writing, and inviting me to write daily, and then also taking some of this like more fluid stream, which is where I'm better, and transcribing it and picking out the good parts. People in the email a couple of weeks ago were responding and really thankful for that, because not everybody wants to take an hour to or two or whatever it's been to watch a full stream, and when they can read a few of the good bits, it works. So thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. That fire red sun is setting in the west. I know it set for you hours ago, and I hope you will enjoy feeding the moon tonight as she prepares to make her way into this Pisces place, where sometime soon in a theater called You, she will speak to that bright light across the way. So love to everyone out there, and thank you for joining me early on for opening the collective heart. May we continue to be in that space and know that one of the greatest gifts that we give when we choose to radiate us is more love for all of us. All right, friends. See you in space.
Bye.